6 points in a playoff game. 6 points in a playoff game. So, like, your fan base, the entire state of Indiana cannot speak, and I cannot stress that enough. You are not allowed to speak. 0 Pacers fans are allowed to talk. Don't talk to me. Don't speak to me. You are not qualified to talk to me or any other Knicks fans because your star player scored 6 points in a game that mattered. So, I'm sorry. I only listen to guys who drop 40 and win. I don't care about officiating. I don't care about free throws, calls, no calls, any of that. I only speak to guys who qualify. I told you, people, I'm going to be an asshole all playoffs as long as we win. I'm going to be an asshole after every single one of those wins. I care for wins. I don't care for anything else. So if you're here complaining, I don't care. If you ask me about the officials, about this call, that no call, this no call, I'm going to ask you one simple question, and I'm going to end the conversation there. I'm going to ask you who has the win, the W, next to their name. That's all I give a shit about right now. This is the playoffs. I don't care about drama. I don't care about necessary stuff that doesn't change the outcome of the basketball game. And the fact of the matter is, my team won the game. Your team lost the game. I care for winners. I don't care for losers. So Halliburton and his 6 points. See ya, pal. I mean, I don't know how many times we got to see this happen, and guys just get, they get karma for talking shit. Kelly Oubre on MSG, karma. Paul Reed on the Knicks matchup, karma. Now it's Tyrese Halliburton trying to play the bad guy role, talking about the Garden, karma. Talk shit, get hit. The Knicks win. It's never easy, It's always a grind. It always gives me a heart attack. Good Christ, does it? And they were down points. They were down 9 points early in the fourth quarter of this game. And I got the same exact vibe, a very similar feeling that I had when the Sixers were up 10 points in the third quarter of Game 6. Just the same feeling like, it's not their game. It's not happening today. But what happens is what usually happens. The Knicks figure out a way to steal it. And that's exactly what happened. They stole one away from the bum Indiana Pacers, who I just have a gigantic disdain for. I hate the Pacers. I hate their fan base. You thought I hated Philly? Oh, man. Philly, the Sixers fans and Philadelphia and the Sixers are angels compared to my just disgust and hatred for this Indiana Pacers team. Oh, man. If you thought I was an asshole then. Welcome to the podcast, everybody. Episode 679. Talking Knicks Pacers, if you haven't guessed by now. Let's get to it. Welcome to the podcast. I'm your host, RJ Carbone. You are listening to BD4, where there's no better way to get your Yankees and Knicks analysis. We also do MMA. Yanks every series, Knicks every game, MMA on occasion. Let's get to it.
Anthony for three. That one goes down, and the game is tied.
I'd like to take this chance to apologize to absolutely nobody.
The Yankees are champions of baseball.
Shaking and baking right here on the neophyte.
You guys trying to close the show. She was doing a great job of feeding that. It's over.
Coming up, though, KP. Don't you regret not coming to the Knicks?
Welcome to the podcast, episode 679. The Knicks win game 1 versus the bum Pacers. What a win last night for the Knicks, 121-117. You know, Brunson and Josh Hart get off to that very hot start. The Knicks defense was playing very good and smart against Halliburton early on. And the Sixers, just the Sixers and the Pacers overall, they were defending them well to start. But then the Indiana bench comes in and they start hurting the Knicks. Obi Toppin some moments. TJ McConnell, pain in the ass. That guy Shepard comes in. Jackson is just hurting the Knick bigs. Then Thibs goes double bigs with Precious out there. That happens for a few minutes. Not pretty. The Knicks, though, they're up 3 after 1. Looked like they were on pace to start pulling away. Maybe make it a semi-laugher, but they're still up 3 after 1. Second quarter comes, though, and the Knicks defense changes for the worse. We'll get into that. Brunson and Hart are still the only good Knicks out there at the moment. Like, only consistent source of offense was them two. Everybody else was kind of off and on or just off. And then, you know, they're just letting Indiana play at their pace, play their game, their high-tempo style play. And it was a very bad half for the Knicks. Fortunately, Isaiah Hartenstein saved them with the last-second heave beyond the half-court mark. Gets it to go, and I think the Knicks enter the halftime down only 6 or maybe a little less. Third quarter comes, and you could tell the Knicks came out with a different energy. So Thibs must have really gotten into them, to say the least. The energy picked up. They just looked like a different team. Josh Hart was providing some excellent minutes. Donte DiVincenzo with a massive third quarter. Outside of a couple of bad turnovers in a row, he had a huge third quarter with the shot making. Thibodeau wins that unlikely challenge. That was nice. And then he goes with an interesting lineup decision late in the third quarter. We might touch on that. But the Knicks are down 5 after 3. Fourth quarter comes, and I'm not going to lie to you. The fourth quarter to me was kind of a blur. Like, I remember the events, but, like, they're all jumbled and out of order. I just know, like, there were a lot of fouls. There were a lot of whistles that maybe should and shouldn't have been called. There was a lot of bad decision-making by Jalen Brunson. OG Anunoby had a massive number of possessions defensively. Donte DiVincenzo with the three-point dagger, and that was it. And that was such a huge... And it was a good job by the Knicks on that Donte 3 from the left wing. It was a good job by the Knicks to put Hart on the corner and Donte on the wing one pass away. So Brunson could have that outlet off the help. He knocks it down. That was kind of the final nail in the coffin. Obviously, this was the... again, it's all jumbled together, but the Indiana call on the moving screen that went against them after the Brunson turnover. The kicked ball that wasn't really kicked. You know, whatever. I don't care. Again, like I said, at the end of the day, I'm looking at the scoreboard. I don't give a fuck how they get it done. I'm looking at the scoreboard. And the scoreboard says, correct me if I'm wrong. Seriously, anybody who's asking, anybody who's just correct me if I'm wrong. True or false, the Knicks won 121-117 over the bum Pacers last night. So that was huge. Jalen Brunson scored 43 points. And then the Pacers superstar scored 6 points. So a reminder that your superstar has to do more than that for you to win a game. So a huge win for the New York Knicks. Despite that, this, again, it had the feeling of like a game that the Knicks weren't great in, right? Like you could say the Knicks, you know, shouldn't have won that, but just because of the way they were playing, especially defensively. Like, they're going to have to make adjustments defensively. And I have no doubt that Thibs is on them right now. As I speak, he's on their asses about what we have to do to defend this Pacer offense. But they were getting beat up in the pick and roll, in the pick and pop. I thought they helped too much on Halliburton for a guy who has just not been the same player in the second half of the season ever since the hamstring injury. My gosh, he's not been the same guy. And I thought they just sent way too much help his way. And that opened up the lanes for Miles Turner on the roll. And I think the Knicks' backside help was a little too slow getting over in rotation a few times. I thought it opened up the pop, too, for Miles Turner. There was a possession mid-second quarter. Halliburton draws 2 on the roll. That opens up Turner up top for a three-pointer, and the Knicks got burnt there. So I think they have to do a better job of figuring out when to switch it. Early on in the game, those early switches onto Halliburton with Isaiah Hartenstein were working very effectively. And you could see that Halliburton was very hesitant to drive the switch. He was very hesitant to step back. And I think that has a lot to do with the injury. He's got a bad hamstring. He's got a bad back. He's not the same guy. So you can switch those and be more effective out of it. But the Knicks went away from it. They went away as the game progressed. They were only switching in late clock possessions to begin with, but they just really, you could tell they were fighting the switch as the game progressed. And, Thibs and the Knicks are not a team that switches. They were only 29th in switch frequency this past season. But, Thibs is a coach who prefers to keep the matchup where it begins, at the top of the action. He wants that matchup. And his MO is not, he doesn't, especially with his fives, doesn't like to switch it. And so it's tough because Mitchell Robinson was very bad last night. I would like to go to Precious Achiuwa. I think a lot of us were asking for him to go to Precious because he's the only Knick big who can really switch out. He can hold his own on an island against the Halliburton, against Indiana's guards. The problem is, you are risking, if you do switch it, you're risking Brunson on Miles Turner or Pascal Siakam. You're risking that mismatch, right? We saw when the Knicks were switching a little too much in the third quarter of Game 5 versus Philly. You saw a couple of those pick and pops lead to Embiid shooting over Jalen Brunson. So, Indiana run an early offense. It's a lot of off-ball motion, quick in the shot clock, and that led to a mismatch or two off the switch. Or if Brunson hedges, Turner's just going to force him into the paint, and then he's kind of in this in-between land. But, when the Knicks went away from the drop and they started sending 2 to the level, like I said, your backside help was a little slow. You had Turner in the short pick and roll, OG on Siakam, because Siakam can knock down the three, so he's late on rotation to the basket. If there's one thing I think they did do a very good job of defending, those Siakam pick and pops. I think the key for the Knicks this series is to dare the Pacers into that action. Give Siakam the open three, especially when he's above the break. And you saw it a couple times in this game. Like, there was a sequence in the middle of the first quarter where the Knicks, they were in ice coverage on pick and roll. You had Dante taking away the middle from Halliburton, forcing him to the wing. OG Anunoby's in a deep drop, so he's daring them to hit the pop. So Halliburton with OG in a drop hits the pop. Siakam takes the open three and he misses. There was another possession like that, I think, in the first half some point. You had OG and iHart switch the action. Hart rotates from the weak side to close out on the pop. So they weren't putting a ton of emphasis on covering Siakam on the perimeter. And I thought that was a good thing for the Knick defense. But yeah, they're going to have to tighten up their pick and roll defense overall. We'll see what kind of coverages they mix in, but I didn't like it. I thought in the first half the Knicks were killed on the offensive glass. Like, they were allowing way too many offensive rebounds by the Pacers. I think they let them grab 5 offensive rebounds in the first half alone. You know, part of the Knicks' strength is ending possessions. They weren't doing a very good job of that until the second half came. But there was, you know, late in the third quarter, I don't know what this was, but it led to very bad defense. You know, Indiana went big, and then Thibs goes small with Hart as the 4-man. I think the Pacers had Shepherd, TJ McConnell, Obi Toppin, Pascal Siakam, and Miles Turner out there. So they went with their big lineup, and Thibs went with the small lineup of Brunson, Deuce, Dante at wing, Hart at 4, and then Mitch. And you really saw the final minutes of the third quarter, the Knicks had trouble getting stops with that lineup. And I just thought there were a lot of bad individual defensive performances. You know, a lot of the guys from last night's game didn't put up their best defensive efforts. Not effort, but best performances. You know, Ihart wasn't great. Mitchell Robinson in that second quarter, good God, like, what's his name? Isaiah Jackson made him look foolish. Which, like, I was confused as to why Rick Carlisle didn't go back to Jackson much in the second half, because that second quarter was very telling. Mitchell Robinson just not being able to keep up there. Deuce McBride had a tough time on TJ McConnell. You know, he had a rough night. OG Anunoby wasn't the same defensively, and I do question if it's the best idea to stay home with OG on those Siakam post-ups. He wasn't terrible on them. I just don't know if that's going to be the best matchup to go to. But OG was probably the best defensive player last night regardless. You know, I thought he had huge moments down the stretch. You know, and this is where we could start talking positive. Like, man, without OG Anunoby, they don't win this game last night. You know, you go and fast forward to late fourth quarter, and OG Anunoby with 3 significant stops in a row. You know, he's helping off the strong side corner where he stunts to Halliburton and gets the steal, right? You have Siakam in the corner, who's a good corner shooter, but OG's got the wingspan to where he's able to help off, and then if he needs to close out, he'll close back out. But he gambles, stunts at Tyrese, it pays off, gets the steal, Brunson ties the game on the other end. And then the next time down, you get the steal and slam off of the Pascal Siakam roll. That puts the Knicks up 2 points. And then he gets a big stop on Pascal Siakam in isolation off the spin move. The Knicks go down and answer back, and that puts them up 4 points. So he was part of a very big swing. Despite his defense not being the same, he came through when it mattered for the Knicks, creating offense out of defense. And speaking of the offense, like, yes, let's get to the offense. Because, like, first of all, while we're on the topic of Anunoby, I loved how the Knicks were using him offensively. You know, they were kind of using OG in that Boyan role where, hold on one sec. All right, I thought we were going to crash there. Just give me 1 sec. All right, here we are. Yeah, they were using Anunoby in that Boyan Bogdanovic role where he was slipping the high screen on the empty side, right? Those ghost screen actions, and he got a basket in pick and roll late in the second quarter. On the second side, the Knicks were running like a hawk action stagger for Dante, but on the strong side, you had the Brunson pocket pass to Anunoby. Anunoby drives on Siakam, who was in a drop, and then he finishes with the spin move. And then you had, early in the fourth quarter, OG getting a basket in the pick and pop with an empty side pick and roll between he and Deuce. Indiana sends 2 to the ball on the Deuce pick and roll. OG slips into space on the pop. Deuce kicks it to OG. He knocks down the 3. So that's a little wrinkle that I would like to see the Knicks go to more. I was actually surprised that the Pacers weren't switching it. I think they eventually will start switching that. And if they do, the good thing is the Knicks can counter that mismatch by going to an Anunoby post up versus the switch, right? You know, any Knicks fan has seen since OG has come here, he does an excellent job of creating offense on the mid post, much like Bojan Bogdanovic did. But if they do switch that action, you can just use that to your advantage and pivot to OG on the post. So I thought that was a good wrinkle in the offense. Of course, I mean, Jalen Brunson, like time and time again, right? What else is there to say about this guy? I think he's going to have himself a series. I don't know who's going to win this series. I'm not going to lie to you, but I think that Brunson's going to have an even better series. I just don't know that Indiana can guard him. Philly at least had the personnel, right? They had the length in Oubre and Batum at times. The Pacers don't have the length to put on Jalen at the point of attack. They also scheme the Knicks offense very differently than Nurse did. Nurse would play, he would use junk defenses and stuff, but the Pacers stay home. They stay home on the corners and on the wings because they want to prevent the 3-point attempts. And that worked to a degree. Like the Knicks were limited to just 23 threes. But what it did leave was it left the middle open for Jalen Brunson. And anybody who knows the Knicks knows that Jalen Brunson loves to use the middle. He loves to drive off the nail. And, what what the Sixers were doing early in that first round series were at times they would try to ice those Brunson pick and rolls to take away the middle and shade Brunson into help. But Indy doesn't really use that. They gave him the middle and it just left Brunson with way too much space to operate in, and he used every bit of it. And he ended up with 40 whatever points. I thought in isolation, like there were a ton of, like speaking of personnel, there are not many individual matchups that I like for the Pacers if I'm a Pacer fan. Like the Obi Toppin switch has potential to be food for Jalen Brunson. The Tyrese Halliburton switch has potential to be food. That was like the Knicks were trying to spam guard screens to get the Halliburton switch a lot, but it wasn't always coming because you got to give credit to Nembhard and even Naismith for being incredibly difficult to screen off. So it ended up being a lot of Brunson versus Nembhard in isolation, right? Indiana wasn't really sending two to the ball often. They weren't really being forced into rotation. So Brunson would take Nembhard and ISO. He was torching him. Post-ups and getting downhill in transition, pistol actions with he and Anunoby to get him downhill against Nembhard. He was shooting right over him in the fourth quarter. That three-pointer he hit over him. A couple of step-back mid-range. That big shot from the post to tie it with a minute or two left. That was over Nembhard. He was attacking the Miles Turner deep drop coverage. So they don't have a way to stop Jalen Brunson, and I wouldn't be surprised if one of these 40s turns into a 50 spot within the next few games. I thought the Knicks did a good job using Isaiah Hartenstein effectively. Doing the usual by cutting off ball and coming around screens, of course, using his passing and his vision and his quick decision-making, using DHO. But they were also using him in the middle off of relocation to where they hit him off the drive so he could get to his floater. That floater has been such a strength this postseason for iHeart. He's got such a good touch to use on that floater where he's going to it, from out a little bit of distance now too. And the Knicks, what they're doing is they're setting that up off the drive. And he went to it a few times last night. And you got Brunson and iHeart working the short roll again. When Indiana did play up at the level, Brunson would hit iHeart to force the Pacers into rotation. And it was working. So that's going to be a two-man action they continue to exploit the Pacer defense with. And listen, like I said, the Pacers played their style, but the good thing is the Knicks have a guy named Josh Hart who's able to match that high-tempo style of play. And man, I can't say enough good things about Josh Hart's postseason, but now you're seeing why you live with the bad. Because while it's tough sometimes when the game settles down in the half court and he's constantly being cheated off of, his athleticism, right when he grabs the defensive rebound, and his ability to just go coast to coast and finish with the basket and get ahead of the defense just by sprinting, it is so impressive. It is so important. And he was huge in that first quarter doing precisely that. And then you talk about the rebounding. Of course, the defensive rebounding, but the offensive rebounding. So impressive. He had 4 offensive rebounds on the night, which was more than every other Knick combined. And I think I saw something on Twitter where somebody brought back a quote by Steve Kerr saying, like, there are 50-50 balls, and then there are 30-70 balls, which Josh Hart gets. Like, if that doesn't perfectly explain the impressiveness of these Josh Hart rebounds, like, each one of these offensive rebounds, like early in the second quarter, he grabs a weak side rebound with Nembhard boxing him out. Jackson's also under the basket, but Hart pushes his way underneath the basket, and then he uses one arm to just tip it out between two bodies. He tips it out to iHart. Early third quarter, iHart misses a floater. Hart tips it away from both Siakam and Turner, like no problem, and he gets it to OG on the wing. Fourth quarter, Dante misses that 3. You have 3 Pacers under the basket, Siakam, Turner, and I think Nembhard. Hart skies up for the rebound around all of them, kicks it to Brunson on the weak side wing. Inspiring. Just inspiring. Like, he's able to do this every night, and he played 48 more minutes last night. He's not sitting in these games. And we're talking about the intangibles. The guy scored 24 points outside of that. 24 points, 13 rebounds, 8 assists, 3 steals, and a block. Again, I joke lightheartedly about the whole LeBron Giannis thing. Like, if Josh Hart had a jumper, he's on their level. I joke about that. But, like, he's the role player version of that. Just the durability, the athleticism, the energy, the ability to push the pace and just crash hard. It's unbelievable how he has just become a piece of this Knicks team ever since being traded here. I mean, it's not a coincidence that they have this insane winning percentage when Josh Hart plays in games. Ever since going back to the trade, like, they went on an immediate 9-game win streak. Very similar to OG. Like, the impact has just been undeniable. Unfucking deniable. That's the best way I can put that. So, using him in every way you need. Of course, though, listen, the best player on the floor continues to be one of the best players in the NBA. And that's this man right here.
Bing bang.
Jalen Brunson. Jalen Brunson, 43 points last night, 6 rebounds, 6 assists. He shot 54% from the field, 100% from the free throw line. Did this in 44 minutes. This is now his 3rd game ball of the postseason. This playoffs. We only hand them out in wins. 40-plus points in 4 consecutive playoff games. Folks, that's the first player to do that. That's the first player to do that since Michael Jordan. I shit you not. Jalen Brunson, 40-plus in 4 straight games, 4 straight playoff games. First since MJ. And that's my kind of stat. Like, usually we overdo the fuck out of it with these stats. You know, it'll be so much things thrown in. Like, you'll throw 3 different numbers in one stat. It's annoying. This is simple. There's no bullshit. It's just one straight stat. 40-plus, 4 consecutive playoff games. Michael Jordan. Jalen Brunson added to that list. It's insane, too, how, like, it's not shocking. Like, we expect this now. Like, there was a point in the telecast last night where they showed Brunson with 29 points, and I said, it's going to be 40 by the end of the game. I said that to myself. It'll probably be 40 by the end of the night. Here we are. It's insane. The guy is a pure bucket getter. It's Kobe-like, it's Allen Iverson-like, where it's not always great looking, but it wins you the game and it gets it done every single time. It's super fucking impressive. Sorry, I'm in a fucking group chat. So I'm giving Jalen Brunson the game ball from the starting unit. It's going to be hard to pick one on the bench to give it to, but I guess due to process of elimination, I mean, there were only 2 guys on the bench. Deuce was horrible last night. Mitchell Robinson, I'll give him his second game ball. Oh, that's the wrong graphic here. Sorry. I didn't make a graphic for Mitch because the numbers weren't impressive. I mean, he wasn't good, but he did figured it out a little bit in the second half. It was one sequence that really just, stood out to me. It was early on in the fourth quarter, part of a big point swing, and it was Mitchell Robinson. Like, the Knicks are down 6 points at this point, early fourth. Mitch grabs an offensive rebound in traffic off of a Jalen Brunson miss. The ball gets out to Hart. Hart drives for a dunk. That cuts the deficit to 4. And then on the following possession, on a defensive stand, Mitchell Robinson's rim protection just showing up, contesting multiple shots at the basket. That leads to a Dante DiVincenzo three-pointer where he pulls up on the dime in transition, open 3, cuts it to 1. So Mitchell Robinson was a big part of that turnaround there in the fourth quarter. So that's why I'm giving him his second game ball of the postseason. I'll talk about one more thing before we can wrap this one up. And we'll do that as soon as we return from our break here on the podcast. Episode 679 of BD4. Knicks win game 1 versus the bum Pacers. We'll talk more when we return from break. Stay with us.
Hey there. Thanks for listening in so far. If you enjoy this episode, please give us a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts. And if you're on YouTube, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks so much. You can follow us on social media as well. On Instagram, we're at BD4Pod and at Rob J. Carbone. On X, we're at BD4Pod and at RJCBD4. And on Facebook, we're BD4. If you're interested in our website, just go to www.bd4blog.com. You can subscribe to our blog on there right on the front page. Just like on the podcast, we cover Yankees, Knicks, and MMA. Also on our website are the links to the different platforms for the podcast. Thanks so much.
Studio 69 Productions is a podcast production agency created by Leo Rodriguez to allow content creators to market their podcast. It's an online platform that will market your podcast or any other project that you're working on. Get in touch with Leo Rodriguez from Studio 69 Productions. You can find Studio 69 Productions on Instagram at Studio69NJ. Studio 69 Productions, where dreams are heard and born.
Thanks for listening to BD4, where there is no better way to get your Yankees and Knicks analysis. We also do MMA, Yanks every series, Knicks every game, and MMA on occasion.
All right, welcome back to the show. The Knicks win last night, 121-117 over the Pacers in Game 1 at the Garden. Brunson with 43 points leads the Knicks. Josh Hart coming through big, leading in a lot of categories with 13 rebounds, and he also had 8 assists on the night, and he also led the Knicks in steals with 3 of them. But I'm a little bit concerned still. And granted, this to be fair was a concern of mine in the Sixers series, in the middle of the Sixers series. First of all the fundamental sloppiness from the Knicks last night, the bad turnovers and decision making, the inbounding problems, we got to address that, but I expect that to be fixed because that's not acceptable to have fundamental fuck-ups like that. And I expect Thibs to be on their ass about that. But what really concerns me is just this workload, and I just worry that it's eventually going to catch up to them. It's obviously a super, super short rotation right now of 7 guys. It's a 2-man bench, and it's 5 starters for 40-plus minutes. And that's not an exaggeration. It's really like a 6-man rotation when you consider each of those 2 bench guys are getting 8-9 minutes a night. Brunson is just forced to do so much labor inside of those 40-plus minutes, and you consider the Knicks playing like that with Indiana playing at the pace of play they play at, and they run 9. Carlisle runs 9. The Knicks are out here running 7. You got to consider the intensity of all 7 games of these Knicks games so far. I just worry that it's just going to catch up to them. And, Thibs is kind of short on guys here. I get it. But I do think he should consider, and it's not him, so I wouldn't be shocked if we don't get this, but consider expanding it to 8. Dare I say 9, like Alec Burks minutes. Would have never thought I would be hoping for them, but here I am with how taxed this team is right now. Alec Burks might have to get some minutes just to spare a couple of these guys, to spare Brunson. Precious Achiuwa, give him some minutes at the 5. It doesn't look like this is going to be a Mitchell Robinson series. He looks slow. He looked very uncompetitive last night against Jackson. Mitchell Robinson's best, his best asset is his rim protection. But Miles Turner is in pick and pop most of the time. I don't know where Mitch is going to really shine because that's his weakness, is coming up to the perimeter. And Precious Achiuwa, if you use him as a 5-man, that makes the most sense to me because he can switch out up top. He's able to cover that ground better than Mitch can coming up. I did not like the Precious at the 4 minutes. Indiana went straight into a zone, and the Knick offense was just very abysmal for those minutes, despite the defense maintaining even. In a playoff series, you cannot do Josh Hart, Precious Achiuwa, Mitchell Robinson. That's unacceptable. It's not tenable. That should never be an offense that you run out there. That's not a lineup that can generate any kind of offense in a postseason, especially with Brunson on the bench like you saw initially. That can't happen. And losing Bojan Bogdanovic kills, right? That was spacing, but it was a guy you were able to run offense through for a little, a few minutes a night. It's not just Bojan himself. I don't care what you thought of Bojan, though he did help them. That's one less body forcing the Knicks to overwork their starters. You don't have that anymore. So you're going to need more from your bench. You're going to need Mitch to step up. You're going to need more from Deuce McBride. You can't have nights where he's a 0 on both ends, literally. That's not going to cut it. Deuce has to be better. Deuce has got to be better so he could carry more minutes. Again, I'm not totally blaming Tom Thibodeau because certain guys haven't been good enough to play more than X amount of minutes, but you do have Burks and Precious, who I want to believe are capable of helping this team this series, especially Precious. So we'll see what happens there. But that's it. That's all I have. It was a great win. It's always nice to beat fucking Indiana teams. Ugh. So that felt amazing. Halliburton's a loser, and I expect him to continue to be a loser. So that means I expect the Knicks to win Game 2 at the Garden tomorrow night. With that said, let's wrap this thing up with our trivia and that will be that. Let's get it. All right, so this episode 679, our trivia question. What playoff round did Larry Johnson's iconic 4-point play in 1999 come in? What playoff round did Larry Johnson's iconic 4-point play in 1999 come in? All right, so what round was that? If you want a hint, it was against the Indiana Pacers. Always fun. So that's our question. But that's it. Episode 679 is in the books. The Knicks win. They beat the bum Pacers at the Garden in Game 1. Game 2 tomorrow night, 8 p.m. Wednesday. Should be fun. Hopefully I get back home in time. Fucking shit for that game. And we get this win. So I appreciate you all as always for tuning in, listening, watching. Maybe you're on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, listening. Thank you. Spotify, wherever you are. Appreciate it. And I'll see you in 680, where we're talking Knicks Pacers game 2, where the Knicks will win. All right, later. This episode was brought to you by Anchor.
Hey there! If you stayed the entire way through, we thank you immensely for it. We hope you enjoyed this podcast and that you come back for the next episode real soon. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, download these episodes, and share them with your friends as well. BD4 is a 5-star podcast simply because of you. And we'd like to keep it that way. Have a wonderful day. Go Yankees and go Knicks!